Have you ever written a line of code that checks multiple conditional statements only to get a value error or some other semi-obscure error? This week we'll find out why. Welcome to another MetPy Monday. Hello, I'm John Lehman, a software engineer for Unidata. On this week's MetPy Monday, I want to show you a common trap that people fall into when writing multiple conditional statements, and it all comes down to order of operations. There's a little bit more to it than what you might have learned in algebra class because we're dealing with computers and they need more sets of rules than we do because normally as humans we're not thinking in terms of logical and bitwise operators. But we'll get to that. So first, let's import Numpy. We're going to need it a little later. And as an example, I'm going to write a line of code to check and see if we need to calculate the wind chill. So we calculate wind chill if the temperature is less than or equal to 50 degrees Fahrenheit and the wind speed is greater than or equal to 3 miles per hour. So I'm going to create a temperature variable. I'm going to set it to 12. And a wind speed variable, I'm going to set it to 5. So we should be calculating wind chill here. And how would I write this? Well, we're going to say temperature less than or equal to 50 and wind speed greater than or equal to 3. If we run that line of code, true. Let's make sure our logic works. If I decrease the wind speed, that works fine. And if I increase the temperature, that works fine. So that is working exactly how we would have expected it to. What happens if I have arrays? I have a grid of temperatures, let's say, or a time series of temperatures, and I want to know where I need to calculate wind chill and where I don't. Okay, so temperature, we'll create a Numpy array. And maybe I'll have 55, 12, 5, and 20 degrees. And then we'll have a wind speed array of maybe 10, 1, 10, and 3 miles per hour. And so let's just try that exact line of code. So temperature is less than or equal to 50, and wind speed is greater than or equal to 3. Well, that doesn't work, and it gives us a value error. It says the truth value of an array with more than one element is ambiguous. Use a.any or a.all. So what it's telling us here is that it doesn't know how to produce a true or false statement from arrays that have many true or falses. So let's break this down a little bit. So what happens if we say temperature less than or equal to 50? Okay. So that works. Wind speed greater than or equal to 3. That works. And is what we call a logical operator. It is going to produce a true or false as the result. And what the computer's telling us here is it doesn't know how to take false, true, 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 and true, false, true, true, and turn that into a single true or false value. What we really want is a bitwise operation, we would call it. We want to know, are both of these things true? If so, we're going to calculate wind speed. So we want an AND operation, but we want what's called the bitwise AND operation. So a few things that I see people do to try to fix this problem when they encounter it. The first one is putting parentheses around these expressions. That doesn't change the fact that this is still a logical operator and we're giving it several things and it doesn't know what to do. So that doesn't work. The next thing is they might see that the bitwise AND operator, if we look here on our operations table, is an ampersand. And they still get the same problem. And they say, well, I don't understand why this isn't working. So let's try one more thing. I'm going to use the bitwise AND as well as enclose these two statements in parentheses. When I do that, we get false, false, true, true, which is exactly what we want. False, false, true, true. So why did that work and this line not work? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, it all comes back to the order of operations. So if we look at this table, it goes from the most important at the bottom to the least important at the top, or the order of precedence. So down here, we've got expressions in parentheses, that kind of thing. Then we've got subscription slicing. And so these are not typical things that you would have seen in your math class, probably. Positive, negative, bitwise, not, so on. But where it really becomes important is when we get up to this part of the table. Bitwise and, exclusive or, and or are all evaluated before any of these comparison operators. So what's happening here on this expression is we're evaluating the bitwise and first. So we have 50 and wind speed. And we're trying to compare that result to these things later. Again, we have that operator that only can return true or false, and we're asking it to do this for many things. So it's just not going to work like we expect it to. Order of operations is a common gotcha, really. And I would encourage you to use parentheses, not only where you're required to use them, but to group things together logically for yourself or for the next programmer, which is probably you, that has to read your code. It's also a good idea to go and familiarize yourself with this chart. It's in the Python docs. It's also pretty common if you just Google order of operations, computer or programming. You'll find things that might surprise you, like, well, and is evaluated before or. Those are the logical operators or Boolean operators. For example, down here, and is evaluated before XOR, evaluated before OR. Some of this can be used to your advantage to do sort of clever tricks. But when you're doing a clever trick, you always have to think about, will you remember why you did that clever trick? Or will somebody else be able to figure out why you did that clever trick? So I would say go ahead, use parentheses, leave comments, leave some breadcrumbs so you can figure out why you did these things. But I hope that this solves some of the confusion that I've seen around using multiple of these conditional statements and then trying to get a grid operation out of them. I hope that you found this useful, and I'll see you on next week's MetPy Monday.